As Jesus approached Jerusalem that fateful day, he encountered a city brimming with centuries of pent-up expectations. The Jewish people, living under Roman occupation, had crafted an intricate tapestry of hopes around the promised Messiah. Their vision was shaped by generations of suffering, countless hours studying ancient prophecies, and a deep yearning for national restoration. In the markets and synagogues of Jerusalem, whispered conversations painted a picture of a warrior king who would overthrow Roman rule. They envisioned a leader who would restore the throne of David with military might and political prowess. This Messiah, they believed, would transform Jerusalem into the world's capital, bringing wealth, power, and prestige back to Israel. When Jesus entered Jerusalem, his reputation preceded him. Stories of his miracles had spread throughout Judea. Water turned to wine, thousands fed with few loaves and fish, the blind receiving sight, and most recently, Lazarus raised from the dead. These signs seemed to confirm their hopes. Here, finally, was someone with power enough to challenge Rome. The palm branches they waved were more than mere celebration. They were symbols of nationalist pride, reminiscent of the Maccabean victory over foreign oppressors. Their cries of Hosanna to the Son of David carried political undertones, a declaration of allegiance to what they believed would be a new regime. The swift transformation of Jerusalem's crowds from devotion to hostility reveals timeless truths about human nature. When people gathered to welcome Jesus, they formed not just a physical crowd, but a collective mind, where individual judgment often surrendered to group emotion. The initial enthusiasm spread like wildfire through Jerusalem's narrow streets. Merchants left their stalls, women hurried from their homes, and children ran to join the celebration. Each person's excitement amplified those around them, creating a powerful wave of communal fervor. Yet this same dynamic would later work in reverse. As days passed and Jesus failed to meet their political expectations, confusion began to creep in. The religious leaders, masters of social influence, recognized this vulnerability. They moved through the marketplaces and temple courts, planting seeds of doubt. If he were truly the Messiah, they whispered, wouldn't he have acted against Rome by now? The crowd's disappointment created fertile ground for manipulation. Those who had been shouting Hosanna found their certainty wavering. The religious authorities exploited this uncertainty, transforming it into anger. They suggested that Jesus was not just a disappointment, but a threat to their way of life, their traditions, and their very survival as a nation. This psychological warfare worked precisely because it built upon the people's existing fears and frustrated hopes. The same passion that had fueled their praise now fueled their rejection. Jerusalem's religious landscape was a complex tapestry of competing factions, each with its own agenda. The Pharisees, masters of the law, saw themselves as the guardians of tradition. The Sadducees, wealthy and politically connected, maintained a delicate balance with Roman authorities. The temple priests, led by Caiaphas the high priest, controlled the lucrative temple economy. Jesus' growing influence threatened this carefully maintained power structure. His teachings challenged the Pharisees' interpretations of the law. His actions in the temple directly undermined the priests' authority. Most dangerously, his popularity with the common people threatened the Sadducees' political arrangements with Rome. The religious leaders' response was calculated and methodical. In private chambers, they debated how to handle this threat. Some suggested direct confrontation, others advocated more subtle approaches. Caiaphas, with political shrewdness, articulated their unspoken fear. It is better for one man to die than for the whole nation to perish. They sent their best debaters to challenge Jesus publicly, hoping to discredit him before the crowds. They dispatched spies to monitor his movements and record his words. Behind closed doors, they worked to turn influential community members against him. Their network of influence extended from the highest chambers of the Sanhedrin to the street corners where common people gathered. Jerusalem in the 1st century was a powder keg of political and social tensions. Roman rule cast a long shadow over daily life, with their garrison in the Antonia fortress overlooking the Temple Mount, a constant reminder of foreign domination. Tax collectors, backed by Roman authority, extracted heavy tributes from an already struggling population. The social structure was sharply divided. The wealthy elite, mostly aligned with the Sadducees, lived in the upper city's luxurious mansions. The common people crowded into the lower city's narrow streets, their lives marked by economic hardship and religious obligations. Between these extremes, merchants and craftsmen formed a modest middle class, their prosperity tied to the temple economy. Pilate, the Roman governor, maintained order through a combination of force and political maneuvering. His primary concern was preventing uprising while ensuring the flow of taxes to Rome. The approaching Passover always brought heightened tensions, as thousands of pilgrims flooded Jerusalem, their nationalist fervor intensified by the holiday's themes of liberation. In this volatile environment, any disturbance could spark a crisis. The religious authorities feared that Jesus' growing following might provoke Roman intervention, leading to harsher restrictions or even the loss of their limited autonomy. For the common people, daily struggles made the promise of a delivering Messiah all the more appealing, and the disappointment of unfulfilled expectations all the more bitter. The prophecies about the Messiah were deeply woven into the fabric of Jewish consciousness. These ancient texts, passed down through generations, painted vivid pictures of the promised deliverer. From the scrolls of Isaiah came descriptions of both a suffering servant and a mighty king. Daniel spoke of one like a son of man coming in glory. Zechariah foretold a humble king riding on a donkey. In the synagogues and homes of Jerusalem, these prophecies were studied and debated. Scholars pored over every detail, creating intricate interpretations. The common people cherished simplified versions, focusing on promises of restoration and victory. Each generation added layers of interpretation, shaped by their own struggles and hopes. However, a selective reading of these prophecies had taken root. The images of triumph and power were emphasized, while passages about suffering and sacrifice were often overlooked or reinterpreted. When Jesus entered Jerusalem, he fulfilled Zechariah's prophecy of the humble king perfectly. Yet many missed its significance, their eyes fixed on grander visions of military victory and political power. The raising of Lazarus marked a decisive moment in Jesus' ministry. In Bethany, just 2 miles from Jerusalem, lived 3 siblings, Martha, Mary, and their brother Lazarus. When Lazarus fell ill, the sisters sent word to Jesus, but he deliberately delayed his arrival. By the time he reached Bethany, Lazarus had been dead 4 days. The scene at the tomb captured the raw emotion of the moment. Martha's grief mingled with faith as she confronted Jesus. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Mary's tears moved Jesus himself to weep, showing his deep human connection to those he loved. The mourners gathered around, some sympathetic, others skeptical of his previous claims. Standing before the tomb, Jesus commanded the stone to be rolled away. Martha protested, concerned about the decay, but Jesus insisted. With authority that stunned the onlookers, he called out, "Lazarus, come forth." The crowd watched in astonished silence as the dead man emerged, still wrapped in burial cloths. The impact of this miracle rippled through Jerusalem. Witnesses spread the news rapidly, and people flocked to Bethany to see both Jesus and the resurrected Lazarus. For many, this was the ultimate proof of Jesus' divine authority. The religious leaders, however, saw it differently. This public demonstration of power posed an unprecedented threat to their control. The aftermath of Lazarus' resurrection intensified both faith and opposition. For believers, it confirmed their highest hopes about Jesus. For his enemies, it forced their hand. They now plotted to kill not only Jesus but Lazarus as well, seeing him as living proof of Jesus' power. The news of Lazarus' resurrection sparked varied responses across Jerusalem's social spectrum. The common people, already struggling with daily hardships, saw Jesus as a beacon of hope. Market vendors shared excited whispers about the miracle, while women drawing water at wells eagerly passed on details of the event. For them, this power over death suggested power to transform their difficult lives. The merchant class responded with calculated interest. Some closed their shops to hear Jesus teach, sensing a shift in public opinion. Others maintained cautious distance, worried about jeopardizing their business relationships with the temple authorities. The wealthy merchants who profited from the temple trade viewed Jesus with particular alarm, especially after his confrontations with the money changers. Among the educated class, including scribes and teachers of the law, debate raged. Some studied the scriptures privately, comparing prophecies with Jesus' actions. Others publicly challenged his interpretations of the law, trying to maintain their intellectual authority over the people. The Roman observers took note with political concern. Local officials increased their surveillance, wary of any movement that could disturb the peace. Pilate's spies moved through the crowds, gauging the level of public excitement and its potential for unrest. Most poignant were the reactions of those who had known Lazarus personally. Friends struggled to reconcile the man they had mourned with the living person now before them, their worldview fundamentally challenged. In the high priest's palace, an urgent council convened. Caiaphas presided over a gathering of the Sanhedrin's most influential members. The marble halls that usually echoed with legal debates now harbored darker discussions. Reports from their informants painted a disturbing picture. Jesus' following was growing beyond control. The deliberations revealed their deepening fears. Some Pharisees argued that Jesus' teachings undermined centuries of tradition. Sadducees emphasized the political danger. Rome might interpret his growing influence as the beginning of a rebellion. Temple priests counted their declining revenues since Jesus' criticism of the money changers. Caiaphas, shrewd and practical, steered the discussion toward action. His famous declaration, "It is better for one man to die than for the whole nation to perish," masked political calculation with patriotic concern. The council members nodded in agreement, relieved to have their decision clothed in noble purpose. They devised a careful strategy. First, discredit Jesus before the crowds. Next, find legal grounds for arrest. Finally, ensure Rome's cooperation in eliminating this threat. They sent out their best spies, instructed scribes to trap him in his words, and began spreading rumors to erode public trust. Most chillingly, they added Lazarus to their list of targets. His very existence testified to Jesus' power, making him a threat that had to be eliminated. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Mount of Olives as Jesus sent 2 disciples to fetch a young donkey. The selection of this humble animal was deliberate, a conscious fulfillment of Zechariah's prophecy about the coming king. The disciples, puzzled but obedient, returned with the colt, draping their cloaks across its back. As Jesus began his descent toward Jerusalem, the crowds swelled organically. Pilgrims coming for Passover recognized him. Local residents, having heard about Lazarus, rushed to see the miracle worker. Children darted between adults, waving palm branches torn from nearby trees. The procession grew with each step toward the city. The air filled with spontaneous celebration. People spread their cloaks on the dusty road, a gesture traditionally reserved for kings. The rhythmic swaying of palm branches punctuated shouts of, "Hosanna!" and "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." The ancient walls of Jerusalem seemed to vibrate with the people's songs. Yet amid this jubilation, Jesus remained solemnly focused. Looking over the city, his eyes filled with tears. He alone fully understood what lay ahead. The Roman guards watched warily from the walls, while temple spies melted into the crowd, noting every detail. The Pharisees, unable to contain their dismay, demanded he silence his followers. His response was both majestic and ominous. "If they keep quiet, the stones will cry out." The temple courts, normally a place of worship, had devolved into a chaotic marketplace. Money changers sat at tables laden with coins, charging excessive rates to convert Roman currency into temple money. Merchants crowded the court of Gentiles, selling sacrificial animals at inflated prices. The noise of haggling and bleeding animals drowned out prayers. Jesus' reaction was swift and decisive. Fashioning a whip from cords, he drove out the merchants and their animals. Tables crashed as he overturned them, sending coins scattering across the stone floor. His voice thundered through the courts, "My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves." The impact was immediate. Merchants fled, animals scattered, and a stunned silence fell over the temple grounds. In the vacuum left by the chaos, something remarkable happened. The blind, the lame, and children approached Jesus. He healed the sick while children sang his praises, transforming the temple's atmosphere from marketplace to miracle ground. The temple authorities watched in barely contained fury. Their carefully maintained system of profit lay in ruins. More threatening still was Jesus' clear claim of authority over the temple, God's house. When they challenged his right to act, his responses left them publicly humiliated, but afraid to move against him due to his popularity with the crowds. In an upper room of Jerusalem, carefully prepared according to Jesus' instructions, the final meal began in the flickering light of oil lamps. The 12 disciples reclined around the low table, unaware of the profound significance this Passover evening would hold for all future generations. The familiar ritual took an unexpected turn when Jesus rose from his place. Removing his outer garment, he wrapped a towel around his waist and began washing his disciples' feet. Peter protested this reversal of roles, but Jesus insisted. The Master had become a servant, teaching a lesson about true leadership through humble action. As the meal progressed, Jesus broke the traditional Passover patterns. Taking bread, he broke it, saying, "This is my body, given for you." Later, lifting the cup of wine, he declared, "This is my blood of the new covenant." The disciples, steeped in Passover symbolism, struggled to grasp these radical new meanings. Then came the shocking announcement, "One of you will betray me." Anxiety rippled through the room. Each disciple questioned his own loyalty. Judas, already committed to his treachery, received the dipped bread, a traditional gesture of honor that made his betrayal even more poignant. After singing a hymn, they departed into the night. The disciples, though troubled by Jesus' words about his coming death, still failed to comprehend the momentous events about to unfold. Under the ancient olive trees of Gethsemane, the final spiritual battle began. Jesus left most of his disciples near the entrance, taking only Peter, James, and John deeper into the garden. Even these closest followers were asked to wait while he went further alone to pray. In the darkness, Jesus' anguish became overwhelming. Falling to his knees, he prayed with such intensity that his sweat fell like drops of blood. 3 times he pleaded, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." The disciples, meant to watch and pray, instead succumbed to exhaustion. The silence of the garden was suddenly broken by torchlight and the sound of approaching feet. Judas led a contingent of temple guards and Roman soldiers, having chosen this secluded spot for the arrest. His betrayal came with a kiss, a traditional greeting transformed into a signal of identification. Peter, awakening to the crisis, drew his sword and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his ear. But Jesus rebuked this violence, healing the wounded man in his final public miracle. When the soldiers moved to arrest him, he offered no resistance, asking only that his disciples be allowed to go free. As Jesus was led away bound, his followers scattered into the darkness, leaving him alone to face what lay ahead. The night trials began at the house of Annas, former high priest who still wielded considerable influence. In the torch-lit courtyard, the first informal questioning took place, while messengers summoned members of the Sanhedrin for an emergency session. Meanwhile, in that same courtyard, Peter faced his own trial. 3 times he was recognized. 3 times he denied knowing Jesus. The rooster's crow brought devastating awareness of his failure, sending him into the night weeping bitterly. At the residence of Caiaphas, the hastily assembled Sanhedrin sought evidence against Jesus. Despite their efforts to maintain legal appearances, the proceedings mocked justice. False witnesses contradicted each other. Questions were crafted as traps. Finally, Caiaphas demanded directly, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?" Jesus' affirmative response gave them their charge of blasphemy. As dawn broke, Jesus was led to Pilate's headquarters. The Jewish leaders, unwilling to enter a Gentile building before Passover, presented their case from outside. Pilate, sensing their political motivations, attempted to avoid responsibility by sending Jesus to Herod Antipas. Herod, hoping for a miracle show, questioned Jesus at length, but received only silence in response. Frustrated, he and his soldiers mocked Jesus, dressing him in a fine robe before sending him back to Pilate. After Pilate's final verdict, the Roman soldiers took charge. They stripped Jesus, scourged him with a whip, and mockingly crowned him with thorns. Weakened by the torture and a sleepless night, Jesus began the journey to Golgotha, carrying his own cross through Jerusalem's streets. The route wound through crowded streets where, just days before, people had welcomed him with palm branches. Now the mood was drastically different. Some watched in silent shock, others turned away, while still others joined in the mockery. The soldiers, concerned that Jesus might die before reaching the execution site, forced Simon of Cyrene to carry the cross. Among the crowd, a group of women wept openly. Jesus, despite his suffering, turned to them with words of compassion and warning. "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, weep for yourselves and for your children." His mother Mary followed, supported by John and other women disciples. Their grief was profound but quiet, a sharp contrast to the jeering crowd. Every step was a struggle, marked by blood on the stones of the Via Dolorosa. Upon reaching Golgotha, the place of the skull, the final preparations began. The offering of wine mixed with myrrh, a traditional act of mercy to dull the pain, was refused. Jesus would face death with full awareness. The crucifixion began at 9 in the morning. The soldiers nailed Jesus to the cross and raised it between two thieves. Above his head, Pilate's inscription read in 3 languages, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." The religious leaders protested this wording, but Pilate refused to change it. From the cross, Jesus spoke 7 times. He prayed for his executioners, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." To the repentant thief, he promised paradise. He provided for his mother's future care, entrusting her to John. At noon, darkness covered the land for 3 hours, during which Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Near the end, Jesus declared, "It is finished," and surrendered his spirit. At that moment, the temple veil tore from top to bottom. An earthquake shook the ground. The centurion in charge of the execution proclaimed, "Truly this was the Son of God." As evening approached, Joseph of Arimathea, a secret disciple and member of the Sanhedrin, requested Jesus' body from Pilate. Together with Nicodemus, he wrapped the body in linen with spices, following Jewish burial customs. They placed Jesus in Joseph's own new tomb carved from rock, rolling a heavy stone across the entrance. The women who had followed Jesus watched these preparations, planning to return after the Sabbath with additional spices. Early Sunday morning, while Jerusalem still slept, several women made their way to the tomb. They worried about moving the heavy stone but found it already rolled away. The tomb was empty except for the carefully folded burial cloths. Mary Magdalene, overwhelmed by this discovery, ran to tell Peter and John. Meanwhile, angels appeared to the other women announcing, "He is not here, he has risen." The disciples, hearing these reports, initially dismissed them as hysterical tales. Peter and John raced to the tomb, finding it exactly as the women described. While they returned home puzzled, Mary Magdalene remained at the tomb weeping. Through her tears, she saw someone she thought was the gardener. When he spoke her name, Mary, she recognized Jesus' voice and cried out, "Rabboni." Throughout that day, Jesus appeared to various followers. He walked with 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus, discussing scripture and revealing himself in the breaking of bread. That evening, he appeared to the gathered disciples, showing them his wounds and eating with them to prove he wasn't a ghost. These appearances transformed his followers from fearful people hiding behind locked doors into bold witnesses. Their certainty about the resurrection gave them courage to face persecution and death, proclaiming what they had seen and experienced. The events of that week in Jerusalem forever changed the course of human history. What began as a local religious controversy in a remote Roman province became a movement that would spread across continents and centuries. The transformation was immediate and visible in Jerusalem itself. Within weeks, thousands of people who had been present during these events joined the growing community of believers. The disciples, once fearful and hiding, began boldly proclaiming their message in the very temple courts where Jesus had taught. The impact rippled outward from Jerusalem. The story of Jesus' death and resurrection challenged existing religious and philosophical systems. It redefined concepts of sacrifice, leadership, and divine love. The message crossed cultural and social boundaries, offering hope to both rich and poor, educated and illiterate, breaking down traditional barriers between people groups. The events in Jerusalem offer profound insights that remain relevant today. The crowd's rapid shift from praise to condemnation reflects how public opinion can change swiftly when influenced by disappointment and manipulation. This serves as a warning about basing our convictions on popular sentiment rather than deeper truth. The religious leaders' response to Jesus demonstrates how established systems often resist change, even when that change represents truth. Their focus on maintaining power and control blinded them to the very thing they claimed to seek. This pattern continues in modern institutions, both religious and secular. Jesus' approach to opposition provides a model of integrity under pressure. He remained true to his mission despite rejection, neither compromising his message nor responding with violence. His example shows how principle can prevail over popularity. The disciples' transformation from fearful desertion to courageous advocacy illustrates how genuine encounters with truth can fundamentally change people. Their story encourages honest confrontation with our own failures and the possibility of redemption and renewal. The story of that pivotal week in Jerusalem invites us to examine our own lives and choices. Like those who witnessed these events firsthand, we too must decide how to respond to its implications. We can choose to be like the crowd, swayed by popular opinion and immediate circumstances. We might identify with the religious leaders, clinging to comfortable traditions and resisting uncomfortable truths. Perhaps we see ourselves in the disciples, struggling between loyalty and fear, yet capable of transformation. The invitation remains open: to learn from this history, to apply its lessons in our daily lives, and to share its enduring message with others. Whether in our families, workplaces, or communities, these principles of sacrificial love, authentic leadership, and moral courage can guide our actions and decisions. Thank you for joining us on this profound journey through history. If this story has touched your heart or sparked new insights, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. What aspects resonated most with you? How do you see these ancient events reflecting in our world today? Your support means everything to us. Please subscribe to our channel to join our growing community of thoughtful viewers. Each subscription helps us continue creating content that explores these timeless truths. Don't forget to like this video and share it with friends and family who might find meaning in this message. Together, we can keep these important conversations alive. See you in our next exploration of history's most transformative moments.